Substitution is what we're going to look at in this video. It's split into 4 parts. So we're going to start off by looking at single substitution, and then multiple substitutions, and then looking at substitution with powers, and then finally looking at BIDMAS. And we're going to wrap up by looking at some exam questions. So the way my videos work, I'm going to do the example on the left, which is I do. You are then going to press pause and have got the example on the right, which is you do. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the type of example it is. So here, we've been given that y is equal to 5x and work out the value of y when x is 10. So we've been told x is 10. So all we need to do is put x is 10 into there. So here, there's an invisible times sign in the middle. So I can write this as y is equal to 5 times x. Okay, and we've been told in the question that x is 10. So all I now need to do is replace that. So we have 5 times 10. So then y is equal to 50. Okay, just remember there's an invisible times sign right in between the 5x there. And again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this. So there's an invisible times sign there. So we can write this as w is equal to 3 times k. And now we've been told in the question k is 5. So we just replace that. So we have 3 times 5. And we have w is equal to 15. Now moving on, we have some negative numbers here. And it's the exact same approach. So we write out the question and it says a is equal to 5b. We can write that as 5 times b because there's an invisible times sign in the middle there. And we can say, well, a is equal to 5 times, well, what's the value of b? Minus 7. And then we just have, well, a is equal to 5 times 7, well, minus 7. So that will give us minus 35 as our answer. So again, on the right, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this. So we just substitute g into there. And now with this one, there is a decimal, so you can go down the route of actually 6 times 3.5. I can multiply this by 10, which then becomes 6 times 35. And then you can use the column multiplication method to do 6 times 35, which will give you 210. And then when you get your answer, you need to divide it by 10 to do the opposite, because we times it by 10 here. We divide it by 10 here, and then that gives us an answer of 21. Okay? So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on, we're looking at multiple substitutions. So it's the exact same thing. So we're going to write this out again. We have y is equal to 5x. We can write that as 5 times x plus z. Okay, now all I need to do is substitute the values in. So we know that x is 10 and z is 2. So we write this out. 5 times x, which is 10, plus z, which is 2. So that becomes 5 times 10, which is 50, plus the 2, and then that becomes 52 here. And that is our answer there. So hopefully you've pressed pause and I've got the example on the right. So with m, we can write that as 4 times m plus 3 times p. So this one, it'll be 4 times m. Well, what is m? In the question, it says m is 6. And well, what is p? It says p is 2. And then finally, we do 6 times 4, which gives us 24, plus 3 times 2, which gives us 6. And then that becomes 30. Now, it is worth noting here, we did the addition last because we had multiple signs. And this comes into something we'll look at in a second, BIDMAS. So BIDMAS is essentially saying when you have multiple operations like multiplying and adding, well, which one do you do first? So BIDMAS is brackets, indices, decimals, multiplication, addition, subtraction. So you figure out which one to do first looking downwards. So if you look down this, we can see multiplication appears before addition, which means we're going to do the multiplication first, which is why we did this first, and then finally we added, because multiplication appears before addition in this rule that we have here called BIDMAS. So moving on, looking at this one here. So we have P is equal to 6 times R plus 3 times S. So 6 times R, well, what is R in the question? Minus 3. And then we have 3 times minus 2. Again, we're going to do, I'll put brackets around what we're going to do first. So according to BIDMAS, we're going to do the multiplication first. So 6 times minus 3 becomes minus 18, plus 3 times minus 2 becomes minus 6. Now this can be tidied up. The plus and the minus become a minus, so that becomes minus 18, minus 6, which then gives us a final answer of minus 24. So looking at the right, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this. So we have 2 times t minus 5 times y. Now I just substitute the values in. So what is t? Minus 4. What is y? Minus 1. And now I do the multiplication first. So I can do that. 4 times 2 is 8. So that's a negative 8. And then we have 5 times minus 1. So that just gives us minus 5, and these two negatives become a positive, so that becomes minus 8 plus 5, and that leaves us with the final answer of positive 3. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers, mark your work. Now moving on, we're looking at substitution with powers. So x squared is the same as writing y is equal to x times x. Okay, so then we just substitute x in, that'll be 10 times 10. So the answer there becomes 100. So over here we have n is equal to 4 times m squared, and we can just do, well, that'll be 4 times what's 3 squared, and that'll just be 3 times 3, so that's 4 times 9, which then becomes 36. Moving on, now we have negatives here. So we use brackets with negatives just to keep things clean. So if I put brackets, well, in fact, if I just write what's in the question first, so we have r squared, and then I can say, well, actually r is going to be minus 3. And then, well, what's minus 3 times minus 3? That becomes a positive 9. Okay, that is key to know here. When you times two negative numbers together, you end up with a positive number. So over on the right, we have a is equal to 5 times b squared. And now with b, we just need to substitute that in. So that'll be 5 times b. We'll use brackets for negative numbers. And then, well, what does this become? Well, 2 squared is 4. And because they're two negatives, that just becomes a positive. So that's 5 times 4. And the answer here becomes 20. Now moving on to cubes. Now with the cube, it's just saying, well, this can be written as r times r times r. So we can write that 3 times. So if you have p is equal to r cubed, and we replace the r with what's given in the question. And now the question just becomes, well, what's 3 cubed? So that's basically just saying, well, what's 3 minus 3 times minus 3 times minus 3. Now here you have to be careful. When you multiply these two together, that gives you a positive 9, because two negatives become a 9. Positive, and then you're left with minus 9 times minus 3, which becomes a negative 27. So it's key to note here that the sign is negative. So when you're cubing a negative number, the sign becomes negative, and the reason for that is you can see that there. So again, hopefully you press pause and had a go at this. So that's 5b cubed, and then that becomes, well, let's substitute b in, 5 times minus 2 cubed, and what is minus 2 cubed? Well, that's just going to be minus 8. So the answer here is going to become minus 40. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers, mark your work. And now moving on, we have BIDMAS that I mentioned earlier. So we have y is equal to 3 plus 5 times x squared. So first step, let's substitute the value in. So what is x? 2 squared. Now, here we have 3 different things. We have an add sign, we have a multiplier, and we have an indice. So if I look at BIDMAS, this is going to tell me what I need to do first. So according to BIDMAS, we work this way, okay? So the most important thing is what's on the left, and the least important thing is what's on the right. So if I look along this, I can see I stands for indice. That is that. So I'm going to do the indice first. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Then I'm going to do multiplication, which is that bit there. So that is going to be number 2. And then I'm going to do the addition, which is that there. That is going to be number 3. Okay, that is how you figure out what you do first, second, and third. So if we do this first, that becomes 3 plus 5 times 4. Next thing, we do the multiplication. That becomes 3 plus 20. And finally, we just add that together. That's 23. Okay, so hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So we have y is equal to 7 times x squared plus 3. If I substitute the value in for x, so I do the indice first, so that's 7 times 4 plus 3. Then I do the multiplication, so that's 7, 14, 21, 28. And then that just becomes 31. So moving on, here we've got another example. So we have y is equal to 3 times x squared plus 2 times n. And then we can write this as 3 times 2 squared plus 2 times 5. Now we do the indice first, so that's 3 times 4 plus 2 times 5. Now we do the multiplication. You can do either multiplication, we'll just do them both together. So you can put brackets around this to make your life easier. So what we're saying is we're going to do the multiplication first. So that becomes 12 plus 10, and now you just add them together, and that's 22. So hopefully you have pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So that is n squared plus 10 times m squared. So substitute the values in, so that's 3 squared plus 10 times 2 squared. And now do the indices first, so that's going to be 9 plus 10 times 4. Now do the multiplication. That's 9 plus 40, which then gives us an answer of 49. So moving on to looking at questions with negative numbers. So here we have y is equal to 2 times a squared. So we're going to use brackets because it's negative. And then we have the negative there. And then we have 3 times b squared, which is just minus 3 squared. So if you look at BIDMAS again, we do have brackets here, but there's nothing going on inside the brackets. So we can't really do anything with the brackets because there's just a minus 1 in there. So we can ignore that. The next thing on our list is the I. So we can see the indices. So we can do the indices first. So that becomes 2 times, well, minus 1 times minus 1 becomes 1. And then we have 3 times minus 3 times 1 minus 3 becomes 9. So that's the indices done. The next thing we do is the multiplication. So if I put brackets around this, that now becomes 2 minus 9, 18, 27, which then becomes that. And if I take 2 off that, that becomes minus 25. That's my answer. So hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this on the right. So this is 4 times a cubed, which is that, plus b squared, which is minus 2. Again, I'll use brackets for the negative numbers. And then now I'm going to do the indices first according to BIDMAS. So this becomes, careful area, this becomes minus 8 because we're cubing. And then this becomes positive 4. Now if I do the multiplication first, so that's 8, 16, 24, 32, plus 4, and then give me my final answer of minus 28. So here's some practice questions. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers, mark your work. Now here's 3 exam questions I found that are fairly difficult on this topic. So press pause and have a go. And here are the answers, mark your work. And if you would like some more practice on this, I've got a full worksheet on this linked in the comments down below over on my website. And if you found this video useful, I've got loads of other content like this on my channel too.